Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Professor David J. De Los Reyes. My topic for this evening will be a miscellaneous topic. And this miscellaneous topic, it's on the topic of foundations of higher mathematics. The foundation of higher mathematics are actually algebra and trigonometry. For us to pass the subjects going up to the so-called higher mathematics, meaning higher mathematics, mathematics higher than algebra and trigonometry, like differential calculus and integral calculus, differential equations in advanced math. If your knowledge on algebra and trigonometry is not so good, students or persons will be having a hard up thing on passing the higher mathematics. So I will be discussing how algebra and trigonometry affects our knowledge of mathematics. I will give you one example on the so-called algebra portion. The most important thing here is on the so-called fundamental operations. Fundamental operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication and division, and raising to powers. Without knowing those things, okay, it is hard to go to higher mathematics. Okay, so the needed thing under algebra are just the fundamental operations, plus some other things, of course, because if we know the fundamental operations, we could solve the other topics under algebra. But without knowing the so-called fundamental operations, it is hard to pass algebra. So if you cannot pass algebra without knowing the fundamental operations, how much more if you go to higher mathematics? Because on the so-called study of higher mathematics, the basic concept is this. If we are solving a practical problem, we must have to set up our own equations. Then we'll try to solve the unknowns from those set-up equations. And the requirement for us to solve the equations are actually algebra and trigonometry. It depends on the problem. For the number 2 foundation of higher mathematics, like what I said, it is trigonometry. The basic thing that we must have to know under trigonometry are actually the so-called trigonometric functions. Trigonometric functions meaning the sine, cosine, tangent, cotangent, secant, and cosecant. We should know what will be the definition of each by heart. Even though we are sleeping, maybe we know what's the definition of a sine, what's the definition of a cosine, the definition of tangent, and so on. Without knowing those ones, okay, we cannot solve a problem if that problem involves angles, okay? Because if there are angles, of course, there should be the so-called trigonometric function of those angles. So without knowing those trigonometric functions, we could not proceed with the solution of those problems if the given problem involves trigonometry. Okay? I think that's just it. Because for me, I've been a professor for quite some time. So I have taught differential calculus, integral calculus, differential equation, advanced math, and some other things on the electrical side. And I know for a fact that without our knowledge on the so-called study of algebra, much more on the so-called fundamental operations, and trigonometry, much more on the so-called definition of trigonometric functions, uh, it's a must that we should know these ones because, like what I said, according to my experience, I know now without knowing those fundamental operations and trigonometric functions under trigonometry, it is hard to pass differential calculus, integral calculus, differential equation in advancement. Okay, that's it, guys. So I will just give you one example. I will be changing my style for tonight, so I'll be sitting, bringing out the solution of this one. An example of this one, we are given a quadratic equation x squared plus 5x plus 6 equal to 0. The problem is just asking for the value of x. So this is a problem under algebra. This is an easy one, like what I said, but if you do not know the fundamental operations, you cannot solve this one. So if we try to bring out the solution of this one, okay, the given equation is actually a quadratic equation, and under the study of algebra, this is not a problem under fundamental operations, this is a problem under quadratic equations. So just in case we will be solving these ones, of course, we apply our knowledge of the fundamental operations in other things. But like what I said, the most important thing is actually the fundamental operations. Since the given equation is quadratic equation, there are two solutions. It's actually by factoring or by using the quadratic formula. So I will just present the first solution maybe. If we try to use the factoring, the possible factors of x will be an x and x, right? And the possible factors of 6 is actually 3 and 2, right? So we will be writing this under the right hand side to be equal to 0. Actually, we factor out already, like what I said, the first solution is actually by factoring. The possible factors of x will be x and x, and the possible factors of 6 will be 3 and 2. Okay? These should be both positive, because this is positive number here. Because a positive and a negative, this now falls under the rule of fundamental operations. Two positives will be positive and two negatives will also be a positive. But since the middle part is actually positive, of course the sign of this will be plus, and the sign of this will be plus also. This could not be negative, and also this could not be negative, because a negative and a negative will give us a plus 6. But since the middle term is a plus 5x, automatically this should be a plus and this should be plus. And if we try to check the validity of our simplification or our factors, the middle term will be the product of this, which is 3x, plus the product of this, which is 2x. And the product of the middle term is actually 3x plus 2x, and that is actually equal to 5x. So this is correct. So the correct possible factors are actually x, quantity x plus 3 times the quantity x plus 2, and they should be equal to 0. We are now solving a problem on algebra, and some fundamental operations are involved. Like what I said, if we do not know some of the operations under algebra, operations, and one thing more, the so-called simplification, we could not solve the problem. So equating its factor to 0, x plus 3 equal to 0, so x1 now will be equal to negative 3 after the transposition. In equating the second factor of 0, x plus 2 equal to 0. Okay? So x of 2 now will be equal to negative 2. Right? So the answers are actually x1 equal to negative 3 and x2 is equal to negative 2. That's the solution. That's the only solution I will be discussing tonight. There are some other solutions like the quadratic equation, but I just want to emphasize that in the solution of this one, we must have to know our fundamental operations and plus some other things under algebra. Okay? Because under higher mathematics, we could be solving a problem something like this after setting up our equation, but if we do not know how to solve the equation, because we do not know or we lack some knowledge under algebra, we could not solve the problem. Okay? So the answer here is x1 equal to negative 3 and x2 is equal to negative 2. That's algebra. The next example I will be presenting will be I will try to see okay. I will try to adjust my camera. Okay, I will better remove my chair over here. Sorry for that one. I took my seat explaining the first part. For the next part now, we will be solving a problem under trigonometry. We are given a right triangle. This angle here is 45 degrees, and this side here is 8. And the problem is asking for what will be the value of h. H is actually hypotenuse. H is equal to hypotenuse. Okay? So if we try to bring out the solution of this one, okay, we must have to bring out our knowledge of the so-called study of trigonometry. And like what I said, one of the foundations of higher mathematics is actually our knowledge of trigonometry. If we are given this side here, okay, and the hypotenuse in this angle here, the relation of h with respect to 8 is actually sine, right? So if we try to take the sine of 45 degrees, the sine of this angle here should be opposite, okay, over hypotenuse. So this should be 8 over hypotenuse. Okay? So the only unknown now is actually this h here. This is now our knowledge of the so-called study of trigonometry. Like what I said, without knowing the definition of sine, we could not solve the problem. Okay, so h now will be equal to 8. Okay, we will place sine 45 degrees over underneath. Sine of 45 degrees. And this should be equal to 8 over 0.707. And h now, okay, I will take my calculator. H now will be equal to 8 divided by 0.707 equals, it's exact 8 divided by 0.707, 8 divided by 0.707 equals, okay, the value of it now is equal to 11.31. Okay. That is the so-called solution by applying our knowledge of the so-called study of trigonometry. And like what I said, if we go to higher mathematics, without knowing our knowledge of the study of algebra and trigonometry, we could not solve any problem under differential calculus, integral, differential equation in advanced math. So this is just an illustration, a simple illustration, and our knowledge of the so-called study of algebra, and both algebra and trigonometry are actually the foundations of higher mathematics. That's it. So for those of you who would like to subscribe to my channel is at youtube.com/@TruthTVJ de los Reyes. If you want to share it, please click share. Good evening from Los Angeles. This is Professor David J. de los Reyes.